Almost overnight, she went from a possible witness to a person of interest in the case of a missing mom of 5 from New Canaan. The girlfriend in the middle of a bitter and brutal divorce battle.
The stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer. Do you understand?
Turned high-profile murder investigation.
Guys, what happened to Jennifer, Michelle?
We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis.
And thanks for joining us once again for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I'm Shannon Miller. Within the next 48 hours, the jury is expected to begin deliberation. Troconis faces 6 charges in connection with the disappearance and presumed murder of Jennifer Dulos, including conspiracy to commit murder, evidence tampering, and hindering prosecution. Troconis decided not to testify in her own defense. We'll hear her attorney explain why coming up. Now, the defense called one of Michelle's closest friends to the stand. Clara Duperon, who goes by the name of Petu, spoke about their friendship and also told the jury about how the defendant was feeling a few days after Jennifer went missing.
Yes, she was worried because Jennifer disappeared.
Well, the jury heard from an expert witness who specializes in how bilingualism can impact cognitive function. We'll dig into her testimony in just a few minutes. Let's get you back to NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geist live outside Sanford Superior Court once again. And Kevin, let's talk about that decision for Michelle Troconis not to testify, which really came down to the last minute, according to her attorney, John Schoenhorn.
Right, Shannon, good morning. The judge made it clear it was 100% Michelle Troconis' decision if she wanted to testify in consult with her attorney, and she decided she did not want to testify on her own behalf.
If you do not testify during the defense's case and the defense rests, you will not have another opportunity to testify. Do you understand?
Sí. Yes.
The court interpreter stood next to Troconis and translated whenever the defendant responded to the judge's questions in Spanish about her decision not to testify on her own behalf. Schoenhorn told reporters outside of the courtroom after he rested his case that Troconis' testimony wouldn't have added much because the jury has already heard from her in those police interviews.
There were, 7, 8, maybe 9 hours of Michelle Troconis, some of which were played more than once. There is nothing she could add that she didn't already add in those hours of questioning. If we put her on the stand, what was she going to say? Well, in the first interview, I was correct. In the second one, I made a mistake. All of that is now out, and the jury can take it for what it is and decide whether it was mistaken, misunderstanding, or, as Dr. Loftus testified yesterday, implanting of false memories by the officers, which I at least suggest there is evidence of.
Today, Schoenhorn, along with his co-counsel and state prosecutors, will be working on jury instructions. The jury will not be present today. They'll be back tomorrow for closing arguments. Shannon.
All right, Kevin, I want to go now to the statement made by Michelle Troconis' family outside the courtroom on Friday. After the defense rested, the family walked out of the courthouse together, along with Michelle's friend Petu, who testified on Friday. We have blurred the faces of the children here because they are minors. Here's what the family had to say.
The the state, still did not prove that my sister was connected in any of this. And my sister's attorneys did prove that she had nothing to do with any of this. Thank you so much.
I want to say something. I was waiting for this day for 5 years and finally came, and Michelle Troconis is innocent.
Gracias. No, gracias.
Now, Michelle's saying no thank you in Spanish as reporters asked her for a comment. She appeared to be in good spirits. And Kevin, the Troconis family has been consistent in making a show of support for Michelle every single day of this trial.
Right, the family has been here just about every single day of the trial. Her father, her mother, as well as some of her sisters have been coming in and out of the trial as well. Her dad also mentioned after those, as the family was sort of walking away, that there would be an opportunity at a later date in a more comfortable setting to possibly speak with the press as well. So we're expecting, as the case progresses, to hear from the family a few more times, whether it be outside the courtroom here or it's an interview at some point later on.
So, Kevin, let's hear from some of the testimony from the defense's final witness, Clara Duperon, who is known to her friends as Petu. Duperon lives in Canton, but she is originally from Argentina. She explained for the jury how she first met Troconis.
I met Michelle through a mutual friend that we had, that because I'm from Latin America and I have kids the same age as Michelle's daughter, so she thought that it would be a good fit for us to get together. And yes, we grew up with the same culture, so that is a very typical behavior when someone from Latin America come. It's very common that you introduce to them because you share a lot of things with them.
Now, defense attorney Audrey Felsen then asked if she is still friends with Michelle Troconis, and Duperon smiled and said yes. Felsen also asked her what language they primarily communicate in.
Do you and Michelle speak in English or Spanish when you talk?
In Spanish, always.
Do you never talk in English to Michelle?
Unless there is a third person, that third person is an English-speaking language, because of manners or respect, we speak in English between us. It's kind of weird, but yes, we do that. And certain times, though there is a third person and it's night and we are tired, we say, like, excuse me for a minute, we are going to talk something short between us because it is easier to certain words. And we exchanged like in Spanish.
Now, attorney Felsen also asked Duperon if Michelle ever used bad language.
Did she ever say anything, swear words about Jennifer?
No.
Have you heard Michelle swear before?
No. Maybe in Spanish we have like little words that are not maybe the best words to use, but not huge words or strong words.
Now, the defense also asked about swear words in response to Pavel Gumieni's testimony about some alleged vulgar statements he claims Michelle made about Jennifer Dulos. Duperon also testified that she considered Fotis Dulos a friend. She says he often talked to her about his children and was frustrated about the custody dispute. But around a Greek Easter celebration at Fotis's home, 4 Jefferson Crossing, she attended in late April, Petu says Fotis shared information with her about the custody report.
He told that there was a report that came favorable to him.
And what was his reaction to that you observed?
Like, was a good reaction. He was going to have custody of the kids. That is what he told.
Now, Petu is the friend Michelle Troconis told police in her interviews that she was on the phone with while she was in the Ford Raptor along Albany Avenue in Hartford as her then-boyfriend Fotis Dulos dumped trash bags containing evidence with Jennifer Dulos's DNA. Duperon says Michelle didn't talk about being on Albany Avenue as they were speaking. She says nothing about the conversation seemed out of the ordinary.
Did Michelle ever say she was on Albany Avenue with Fotis, or cleaning Edie Mountain?
No.
Okay. While you were talking to her and texting with her, did she seem upset?
No.
Or nervous or in distress?
No.
Or anxious?
Nothing.
So, Kevin, Petu's testimony is important for the defense, especially because of that conversation that Michelle Troconis said she had with Petu while on the phone in the truck. And she says Michelle wasn't anxious. So could it support the claim that Michelle had no idea what Fotis was dumping?
It could. That's definitely what the defense is sort of leading the jury to believe. She is sort of a key witness in that regard, that she had a direct conversation with Troconis both that day as well as conversations earlier on the 24th and after the 24th as well. So she sort of plays that sort of eyewitness role, direct conversation she had with Troconis on the phone about how her mood, her demeanor, how she was in the days around Jennifer Dulos's disappearance. So that's definitely sort of where the defense is offering her as a witness so the jury can kind of understand Michelle Troconis' demeanor around Jennifer Dulos's disappearance.
Now, Kevin, in cross-examination, prosecutor Michelle Manning questioned Duperon about an email she sent to state police back in 2021 after they reached out to her asking to speak with her.
You said you had information that would hurt the state's case.
Yes, of course.
Okay. But you would only answer that if they submitted their questions in writing. that
No,
correct?
not only in writing. I was clear saying subpoena me, and I will be happy to be there and testifying or interviewing.
And you also called them incompetent.
Yes, I did. And I feel like I went a little farther. But yes, I called them incompetent, but then I put in brackets that was not what I said. I said I had two options. One, that you are incompetent, that I don't think so. That was in parentheses. And the second option was that, or you don't want to hear the other side of a story.
At that time, you felt you had information that could help your friend. You're correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that your inseparable, beautiful friendship.
Yes.
You had information. And since the 5 years since 2019 and 3 years since you've been contacted by the police, you kept that to yourself.
Yes, because I didn't trust the police.
Now, defense attorney Audrey Felsen pointed out in redirect that police didn't contact Petu after any of Troconis' arrest in 2019 or in 2020 and didn't reach out to Petu until 2021, 2 years after Jennifer Dulos' disappearance. As the final piece of their case, the defense put a document up on the screen. It's analysis police did on the 2017 Chevy Suburban owned by Jennifer Dulos. Attorney John Schoenhorn wanted to read portions of it, but the prosecution objected because that wasn't part of the agreement they had made about this piece of evidence being presented. A jury was then sent out of the room, and Schoenhorn explained why this report is essential to the defense's case.
This is the report that establishes that the phone that attached by Bluetooth to the Jennifer Dulos vehicle at 2:56 p.m. on that afternoon of May 24th was in fact a number attributed to Jennifer Dulos.
Now, the jury was allowed to read the report on the screen on their own for a moment. And Kevin, what is your take on this moment from attorney John Schoenhorn?
Right, so this was sort of where his defense had to end, and it sort of ended on a bit of a flat note. But the jury will have the chance to read this document. It was entered as a full exhibit, so if those jurors are curious, they can definitely jump in and look at it once they get to the deliberation portion of the trial. But John Schoenhorn, according to the judge, will also have the chance to connect some of the dots that they're trying to put together during closing arguments. So we're expecting to hear a little bit more about that document once we reach closing arguments tomorrow.
And Kevin, there was more testimony on Friday regarding memory. The defense called Professor Viorica Mariam from Northwestern University. Her work centers around how the languages we speak shape the way we think. She testified about how speaking multiple languages can impact cognitive function. Now, the use of Spanish words when speaking in English happened pretty regularly in the interviews Michelle Troconis gave to police. She used words like pero, which the expert testified means but in Spanish, interjected into sentences which she spoke in English. Another word, bueno, which means okay or good. Here's an example from her first interview where she says bueno twice in less than 30 seconds during a conversation that was in English.
If you see the chats, they start making fun. Oh wow, what incredible ha hoop for the stupid robot. I send it also to Peto. I mean, it's like a joke. I'm all the time making stupid jokes. That's my personality. I pay, I go.
Now, Professor Marion says she reviewed all of the interview transcripts and watched the recordings of the interviews as well. She evaluated what she saw and determined that Michelle has conversational English and a medium proficiency. She testified their understanding of that second language can be impacted.
Depending on how proficient they are, they may not understand some words, they may not understand some tenses. There is an opportunity for miscommunication. And the lower the proficiency, the more opportunities for miscommunication and misunderstandings, and misspeaking as well.
Now, Kevin, this was a different expert witness than Professor Loftus on Thursday. This was Professor Marion's first time testifying in court. So what did the prosecution focus on when cross-examining her?
Right, so the cross-examination was similar to the memory expert we had 2 days ago during the trial, but the cross-examination in this case really focused on sort of her lack of direct knowledge of the defendant, Michelle Troconis, and sort of how much time she actually had or spent with Michelle Troconis. Now, she also mentioned outside court that she spent enough time to sort of get a general assessment, and her testimony was focused more on the science than it was on Michelle Troconis, but state prosecutors really took it as an opportunity to jump in on her sort of understanding of Michelle Troconis as a person, her understanding of the English language, and sort of how difficult it would be to make a full assessment without spending more time than she actually did with Troconis.
Kevin Geist live for us once again outside Stamford Superior Court. Kevin, we'll let you get back into the courtroom for the charge conference expected today. And there's been a change in the schedule. The contempt hearing for Michelle Troconis is now going to be held on March 5th after the jury begins deliberation. Now, this comes after Kevin Randolph recused himself from presiding over the contempt case. So today, as we said, will be the charge conference. Tomorrow will be the closing arguments, and then the judge gives instructions to the jury. Then the roughly 200 exhibits are brought into the deliberation room, and counsel gets to observe as this happens. Now, the jury could begin deliberations as soon as tomorrow afternoon. Still ahead on Inside the Trial, Michelle Troconis will talk about the defendant's decision not to testify with attorney Jim Bergen. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We are joined once again by attorney Jim Bergen, partner at Shipman and Goodwin, who handles personal injury and criminal cases. He's also taught trial advocacy for 37 years. Jim, the defense has rested now, another big milestone here to talk about. Of course, we heard from attorney John Schoenhorn at the top of the show. His reasoning for not having Michelle Troconis testify pretty much echoes your analysis on the show, that the jury has heard plenty from the defendant, hours worth of those statements made to investigators. Is this the right move in your view?
Yes. In fact, John said it better than I did, which is we have 7 to 9 hours of her. What else can she say? It is very uncommon. I literally don't remember a case where you have someone sitting there addressing the specific crime and covering basically everything she could and more, because they were, you know, throwing stuff at her to try to get her all upset. So it's as much as you can do. The other problem is, of course, you put somebody on the stand, the prosecution gets to cross-examine on their whole case. So you're just basically asking them to get 2 summations.
So let's talk now about the expert witnesses on Thursday. The defense called Elizabeth Loftus an expert on memory, and specifically implanted memories. She is well known and has testified hundreds of times before. For some, as she put it, unpopular people. So is there any sort of a risk, you think, Jim, bringing in an expert like this to the stand when the jury is exposed to things like past cases and the fee in which they charge for their expert advice?
There is some risk, of course. I think that the judge, for all of us, sort of demonstrated a little frustration, like it was over the top. And it may have backfired a little when they're trying to compare Troconis implicitly with these monstrous defense people who were accused and convicted of the most monstrous crimes. The judge really had to call a halt to it at some point, but they're allowed to do it. The question is, prosecutors' credibility matters. All lawyers' credibility matters. The facts and the evidence are all the jury's supposed to pay attention to. But when you get one of those jump balls, you know, anybody's ball, whoever has the most credibility is going to win those jump balls.
And there's been a couple times that Judge Randolph has brought the proceedings to a halt, saying, let's handle business here, let's reset. Interesting to see in that moment. He took a moment to do that. Meantime, Friday's expert witness had never testified before. This is Viorica Marian, an expert on bilingualism and how it could impact cognitive function, which includes things like memory, attention, and decision-making. And when it comes to those hours of interviews and even Troconis' presence in the courtroom with an interpreter, was Marian's testimony important for the jury to hear?
I thought it was very valuable and effective. For me, frankly, I'm watching her. I'm really interested. Most of what she's saying is something we all kind of know. It's common sense, but it's a little past our thoughts. We haven't spent years like she has, 30 whatever years studying it and publishing. Interestingly, she's never testified before. So she's just teaching. And that's what I always want my experts to do. Just be respectful and help the jury.
Interesting testimony, that's for sure, and interesting that this was the case that brought her to the stand for the first time. What takeaways, Jim, do you have from the defense's case, and what did you feel was successful and what was less successful? Were they able again to establish some reasonable doubt?
Well, I thought they did a good job. The prosecution's whole approach to this case made it a very challenging job. More challenging, frankly, than most cases, because there were basically 3 trials going on. You and I have talked about this before, but 2 of those trials are not even relevant. One is, let's vindicate this mother of 5, and of course we should. Secondly, let's validate all the hard work the police did, of course. So when those points were dived into, and almost in a defensive mode, I think that was not effective. Where he was most effective was the actual trial issue. What was going on in Michelle Troconis' mind? What did she know? What did she intend? And I thought when they brought in witnesses that really knew her well and came across well, frankly, her friend came across very well, and I thought the experts, they came across neutral, respectful, trying to teach, not argumentative, and I think they actually brought out some of the sort of ingrained hostility of the prosecution, which frankly, the best prosecutors, and I've faced some very good ones, Len Boyle, Al Dabrowski, these guys were like always dispassionate, always calm. And you don't like those people because they have credibility. Yeah. I'd rather have somebody going a little over the top, which I've had those, and I'm able to turn that around against them because, oh, shucks, I'm just trying to help the jury.
Couple seconds left here, but is there some sort of relief on either side now that they both rested their case? I mean, now it really is in the hands of the jury.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that moment is just total denouement. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm done other than watching attentively. But after the summation, right now, he's still like, both sides are like really charged. Engaged. Yes, yeah. Charged, that's the word. And so when this is finally in their hands, they've sat down after summation, that is a peaceful time.
More analysis from Jim Bergen coming up. We will talk about that contempt hearing that's now set for March 5th. You're watching Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We are back now with attorney Jim Bergen, one of our legal analysts throughout the trial here over the course of the last 6 weeks. Jim, we heard on early Friday from Judge Randolph that he would be recusing himself from presiding over this contempt hearing for Michelle Troconis that is now set for March 5th with a different judge and a different representation for Michelle Troconis. What do you make about this decision for both attorney John Schoenhorn and Audrey Felsen to recuse themselves from representing her as well as the judge? Is that standard protocol since there might potentially be a conflict of interest? Oh,
absolutely. I love what the judge did. You recall when he was first doing this, I was saying, I think the judge may want to reconsider this. And he did. Now, he's very ambitious. He wants to do everything right. It's just interesting. Anybody who's watched this trial, that is how a judge is supposed to be. Maintain decorum, very respectful of everyone, but mostly respectful of this process. We're going to do this process fair. We're not going to let things get out of hand. You know, so he did that. But then when he saw this thing come up, it's like, well, I got to solve that problem too. Upon reflection, he realized he doesn't have to solve that problem. And these lawyers have nothing, they should have nothing to do with it, because I think I mentioned earlier that how they behaved could be part of the issue as to whether there should be a contempt. Also, we don't even really know what the specifics are of what the order is and all that. So he did a really good job. Just kick this out, get this away from this jury trial.
Within likely this week, we're probably going to see the jury go into deliberation. Take me back to that moment. When they get back into that room, they've got all the evidence there with them. How does that start?
Well, it's interesting. First, they get the jury, first they get the arguments, then they get the instructions, where the judge just simply lays out, here's what the law is, and here's what you should be keeping in mind, you know, what beyond a reasonable doubt means, what you have to find, each of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt. He'll explain the elements. And the lawyers will have already fought over it, making sure the judge has the opportunity to see all the law. Judge alone decides what those instructions are going to be.
Jem, thank you. As always, that wraps up our exclusive Inside the Trial Michelle Troconis streaming special. You can watch the trial live on our streaming channel when court starts at 10 a.m. this morning. An important programming note, because the jury is not in court for today's proceedings, we will not have a recap show for you tomorrow. You will be able to watch closing arguments and jury instructions live tomorrow at 10 a.m. on our streaming channels. And then I'll be back with Jem on Wednesday at 9 to recap closing arguments and a look at the task ahead for the jury. Thanks for watching.